You can start, sir.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Once again, all young students, teachers, participants, mentors, family members who may have joined this particular webinar session from Atal Innovation Mission. I hope every one of you is safe and sound in these very difficult times, and everyone is practicing the COVID-19 safeguards that need to be practiced and advocated by the government, by the health authorities, or by our own institution. I am delighted with the increased participation of all the students who are logging on to these sessions, and it is indeed encouraging for us at Atal Innovation Mission. And more importantly, I think it is a matter of celebration across the nation that young students like you from school are finding the time, the inclination, and the passion to be able to join these sessions, the online sessions where we are bringing forward very distinguished people who have been able to achieve high levels of eminence and excellence in the areas that they are focusing on for your benefit. You see, after all, we get inspired by people and we get inspired by their stories. And at Atal Innovation Mission, our focus has been how do we create an ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship? How do we create a problem solving mindset in our young school students? And the best way to do that is to learn from others, to hear the stories from others, to be able to understand how somebody else is doing so that you can start getting inspired or you can do it. And it has been amazing to see the progress that every one of you have made. I mean, today we have 5,100 Atal Tinkering Labs operational across the country, where in the dedicated innovation workspaces of the Atal Tinkering Labs, every one of you is creating your own story. And innovation, that is a story by itself. And that innovation is using 3D printers, using robotics, IoT, miniaturized electronics, do it yourself kits. And you're creating wonderful innovations, whether it is irrigation management, whether it is IoT based surveillance management, whether it is robotic based waste management, whether it is precision agriculture, agri-tech related innovation, or whether it is helping a person, a disadvantaged person, cross a street. How do you leverage technology? How do you look at the problems in and around the community that you're living in? And how do you, with your imagination, your innovation, your ideas, create an innovation that can create an impact? And that is what life is all about, creating impact. And young students, you have embarked on an innovation journey that many of us, people like me, did not think about even 10 years ago. That is the advantage of the world that you are living in. You already are familiar with words like innovation, words like technology driven growth. You are familiar with what sustainable development goals are. These were all new words to me even when I entered into my career. And so you are very fortunate, you're very lucky to have amazing tools, affordable, accessible, and available technology to learn from. You have an internet through which you are able to gather information, and you are having the access to best practices that is happening elsewhere. Because we all learn, as Isaac Newton said, I stand on the shoulder of giants. And that is where how my innovation and my science has been born from. And every one of us stands on the shoulders of giants. But how do you stand on the shoulders of giants? You stand because you read about them. You learn through their stories. You learn through their tribulations. You learn through their inspirations. And the best way of doing it is through the art of storytelling. So you may be wondering why I'm focusing so much on storytelling. We have an amazing person to interact with today, Ravi Santlani. He has dedicated himself in creating a platform for all the schools. It's called the ScooNews, and he's the CEO of the organization, and he brings out wonderful stories of what is happening in our school across the length and breadth of our country. And what better person to talk about than him to every one of you who has your own story to tell? And why is it important for you to tell your story? It is important because you are becoming an innovator. You are already launched on an innovation journey. And your innovation journey is replete with stories of your success or your failures. It doesn't matter. But as Abdul Kalam said, the word fail is first attempt in learning. And in the first attempt in learning, You tell a story, and through that story, somebody else learns and doesn't make the same mistakes that you have made. And you don't make the same mistakes that somebody else has made. And therefore, the art of communicating your innovation, your learnings in the form of a story is always much more engaging than just being told in a theoretical classroom. You know, all of us enjoy stories. I remember when I was young, my father used to tell me a story every night. He was an encyclopedia of Hindu mythology and Hindu stories. And it was just fascinating for me to hear him. Not only me, my entire family, we used to hear his stories. And I used to get inspired. Hanuman crossing the ocean, how he was inspired by Jambavan, who told him, "You have this inner potential, you have this inner capability, Hanuman, that you don't know about. So you just have faith in yourself, leap across the ocean, and you will do that." And lo and behold, Hanuman said, "Yes, I will have belief in myself," and he leapt across the ocean. Now, why I say that story is that story inspired me and it should inspire you. Every one of you inside yourself has an Hanuman, and that Hanuman has to be awakened. You are capable of enormous innovative talent, and your ability to contribute to the world is enormous. But how do you awaken that? Maybe a story will awaken you. Maybe an inspiring story from elsewhere will awaken you. But you have that potential. And therefore, I am delighted to welcome Ravi Santlani to this particular conversation. Ravi, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, the ScooNews, that what inspired you to get into this storytelling journey, because this is going to play a very important role for every student who is listening, that how does he or she tell their own story that can inspire others.
First off, let me thank you very much, Mr. Ramanan, for the opportunity. It is such a pleasure being seen on the same screen. I mean, with such a person like you. I mean, this is really amazing. And thank you to Niti Ayog and Atal Tinkering for this opportunity. And I'm pretty sure that the kind of work that is happening at ATL. I mean, when I was there at your office, early this year, I actually commented that when I feel like that I'm not in a government office, but I think it's startup kind of office. It's such vibrant, positive, vibes I got there. So a little bit about myself. I'll just introduce myself, but for all the friends who have joined from the length and breadth of the country, my name is Ravi Santlani, and I run a small media house based out of Jaipur. And it was 5 years ago when I started ScooNews with the vision of making our country truly a global education powerhouse. There was an immediate need of a platform which was all about teachers and work on their skills. We felt the need and we founded ScooNews. We still believe in our core philosophy that if we invest in our teachers, we will be able to see a huge change in our country and its future leaders. We are by far the largest media platform for the education sector, and we have over 500,000 plus educators consuming our content online and offline. Trust me, we have done more than 17,000 stories in these last 5 years. And when you visit schoolnews.com, Mr. Kamanan, it's a endless scroll kind of a website. It may look a little old to you, but then again, we kept something in mind where people should keep scrolling for stories. I mean, every news item, we have some kind of a storytelling, and that's something which makes us unique. So this is a little crisp kind of introduction for your service.
Excellent. Excellent. I think it's fantastic. You have captured stories not only for the students, but also for the teachers to inspire the entire educational community. And I understand not only are the stories from India, but from across the rest of the world. So, Ravi ji, how do you get access to these stories, and how do you spot a good story, and how do you have someone tell a good story to you?
Well, I think it's all about reading. It's all about observing. It's all about the relationship and the kind of network that we have. A lot of times, I may visit your office and I may be having a cup of coffee with you, and you talk about someone, and that's where we get to know about people. And we have a proper team who do a lot of background and fact check on people. But yeah, I've come across some really amazing stories that I found to be very inspiring. And trust me, Mr. Ramanan, they were from India. Stories of a school called Purkal Youth Development Society in a village near Dehradun. That particular school is a school which is meant for the underprivileged, a school which is meant for little toddlers and little kids, I mean, who are either, left alone to kind of, live their own life. And a lot of, they come from problematic, background. And the kind of work that has happened there under the leadership of the, Dr. G.K. Swami, I mean, it is exemplary. I mean, look at, I mean, in 1998, he sold his last flat in Mumbai and he came to Dehradun and he bought a little piece of land over there in, with a mission of, teaching these poor kids who otherwise would kind of grow up and do many jobs like, being the truck conductors or maybe clerical jobs and all. And very happy to see that, I mean, now their products, I mean, after 1998, it's been more than 20, 21 years. I mean, I see that their products who were otherwise meant to do those menial works, they're now vice presidents in Coca-Cola, in Pepsi, in Deloitte, in PwC. And that is one amazing story. But again, I mean, there was 20, 21, 22 years of a lot of hard work and sacrifice. Then stories comes from West Bengal where a taxi driver called Ghazi Jalaluddin is driving a taxi the entire day and he's saving money and he's built up a school for the underprivileged. Come on, look at these little stories around us, which are sometimes reported in the mainline dailies. And we kind of dig a little more deeper. We travel length and breadth of India and we meet these people. Talk about Arup Mukherjee, who's a traffic constable in West Bengal, and the entire day he's busy, I mean, controlling the traffic in West Bengal, and he has kind of, I mean, saved a lot of, good amount of money. He has built a school for girls, I mean, who are underprivileged, and of course, Sogata Mitra. I mean, the kind of work that he did, the hole in the wall, experiment and self-organized learning. So all these stories really told me that if we have good teachers with a zeal to make a difference, then half of our country's problems will automatically be solved. And we will prosper as a developed country than a developing country. So this also, I mean, I should admit this publicly now, that all of these stories really made us, or gave us our tagline. So ScooNews tagline is changing teachers' lives every day, every way. So this is, the kind of stories that we dig in, kind of reports, sir.
Wonderful. Yeah, actually, I think a couple of points that you brought out is there are inspirational stories which are there only, but you have to look out for the same. Unless you look out for that story, you don't, it doesn't come to you, and then it is never told. And when it's never told, nobody knows about it. And it is very important. Therefore, storytelling is all about communication, and communication is very important in today's world. So, for example, the most successful companies are the ones who are able to tell the story about their company, their products, their solutions, their services most effectively. Then people understand it and say, hey, I should be using this product or I should be using this service, because they have mastered the art of communication. And while good communication alone is not enough. A good product has to be there at the background. A good innovation has to be in the background. A great innovation doesn't find expression if you don't communicate the story also well. So that is very important, and that is why all our young students, adult tinkering lab students, you may have created a great innovation, but how do you communicate that? The best form of communication is understanding how to tell your story, and that story is what is going to make the impact on the audience or somebody who is trying to understand your innovation and the benefits of that innovation. The way you narrate it, your narrative and your storytelling capability, which means your communication capability, is the one which is going to excite that other person and saying, hey, this is a wonderful innovation, I should know how to use it, I should learn about it, or I should do something similar to it, or I can add on to it. You are going to become the source of innovation and inspiration for somebody else. Now, when you do that, I think it is imperative that one does a lot of groundwork, like you had mentioned. So can you elaborate a little bit on what is the groundwork that one has to do before one writes a story or one tries to communicate something?
Of course, Mr. Ramanan. I mean, it takes a lot of efforts and fact checking before writing a story. I mean, it could be a 4 minute read for you or for any other reader, but actually, it may mean that it took a writer more than 48 hours or more to write, rewrite, and improvise before publishing. We are living in an era of trolling, and reputable organizations and individuals would want to invest good amount of time in writing, formatting, reading, editing, reading it again, editing again, and then again making a couple of other colleagues or friends read and take their feedback and final fact check and then kind of publish. So it's a process in its own. we just can't, I mean, it's not kind of a political reporting wherein anything is happening and you're getting the results and you are just putting those results right away as is on your platform. This is storytelling. And any kind of news, I mean, that you really want the other person to consume, you have to kind of weave storytelling. And all those amazing bestseller authors, I mean, why? I mean, their books sell because you already have 7 or 8 similar titles in the market since 20 years. But this gentleman
Right.
comes from nowhere and he writes a book on the same topic and becomes a bestseller. So there is an art behind it. I mean, you have to kind of really be focused and switch off your WhatsApp and switch off your TVs and everything. And I mean, just find your a little space where you could sit and you could think about it. That man, I'm not writing it, but imagine if I'm reading this kind of a story or this kind of a thought process, how would I react to that? So I think a
Right.
writer should kind of act both as writer and reader. And that split personality kind of a thing which you have seen in the movies, I think that could be a small little experiment for ourselves to kind of shift into the other side of the table and read what you have written. Just deleting that thought from the mind that I have written this particular thing. So I think it's some art, and this particular art is in everyone. I mean, look at you. I mean, you actually told a story before actually starting this session about the Hanuman and the kind of story that your father used to tell. So I think if you have that kind of a story right now afresh in your mind, then I think that was a great storytelling that your father did. So I think, I mean,
Right.
my answer would be that when there is a lot of effort which goes behind creating a story.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Ravi ji, I know that you have so many things to tell. Can you share a little bit about how do you keep your audience engaged with your content? What exactly is creative writing, and why is it important at this day and age? And I would love to hear from you a little more in detail. And if you have a presentation or something like that, it would be great to
Okay.
watch that.
With your permission, I mean, if I can share a little presentation, of course, it's not little, it doesn't look like a little presentation, but I'll try to sum it up under 10 minutes. And
Please do.
I would rather, before sharing my screen, I mean, I would rather tell that, I'm advocating that there is no course in this world which can make you a good storyteller. So all my friends
Hmm.
listening from different parts of India, whether you are a student, whether you are a teacher or a parent, I mean, this is one thing that is based out of my experience, that there is no course made in the world. I mean, of course, you may find a lot of courses online and offline, but trust me, with my experience, there is no course which will teach you storytelling, because storytelling is right there in your heart. You just have to kind of dig a little deeper. And with my
Right.
presentation, I will focus on this particular aspect. And I just want to check, I mean, if my screen is visible to you, sir.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Nail Smith, I just picked up this quote. I mean, we are all storytellers. We all live in a network of stories. There isn't a stronger connection between people than storytelling. Look around you. Look about your relationship with your spouse or with your parents or with your friends or with your cousins. There is some kind of a story in it, and I'm sure. I mean, when I say that, you will know. This was a painting which was found in the ancient caves at Lescox. This particular painting shows us that there were stories back there in 17,000 years back. I mean, this is the estimated, the age of this painting is estimated at 17,000 years. So as long as there have been people, there have been stories. This is one point that I would like to make, that storytelling was not invented by someone. It came with the existence of the human being. And you are surrounded by stories every day. Look at the newspapers, the radio, the TV. There are stories everywhere. As you so aptly put, that our religious Vedas, Ramayanas, Mahabharata, these stories have lasted hundreds and even thousands of years, and are still I mean, being told. I mean, look at Mr. Ramanan. I mean, he actually shared a little story from that. So the lessons teachers give in schools are often stories. Songs tell stories, picture tell stories, movies tell stories, stand-up comedians, look at them, they make their living with stories. When you tell a friend about something that happened to you are actually telling a story. Can you think of the last story you heard? Think a little hard, and you'll come to know that it may be something you just heard a few minutes ago. Stories are powerful. Mr. Ramnan, I said this before and I'm going to repeat this loud and clear. Stories are powerful. I mean, stories made the strongest people in the world, whether it was Martin Luther King, or whether it was our honorable prime minister, or whether it was a scientist at NASA, they were stories, and stories were told in a very brilliant manner, and hence they are powerful. Stories can teach morals, they can teach history, they can entertain us, they can make us think about things in ways we have never, thought of them before. They can make us laugh, and of course, they can make us cry. Remember the last movie that you sat in the, pre-pandemic times, I must say, and you actually came out crying. That was a story told brilliantly. So telling stories is a large part of what makes people connected to each other. If you have a best friend, if you have, imagine, I mean, you have 10 cousins from your maternal side and 12 cousins from your paternal side, but there are only one or two whom you're close to or you like. I mean, there is 100% a story between you two cousins. So the point here is, stories are a part of every culture. Stories about a country and its history help us feel proud of a nation. And of course, stories about our ancestors teach us about where we come from and the things we have in common. And we take pride and, with other people around us. But imagine the moment we land in a foreign country, there are very less things in common between us and them, as they are living in a totally different world of their own stories. I mean, this presentation would be available if you need, and you could actually go through it and spend at least 2 to 3 minutes in each slide, and you would come to know. This is a basic kind of a thing wherein how the storytelling affects the brain. So we are all wired to appreciate and remember stories. Our brains, mirror stories, and they respond to stories almost identically to actual events that we experience. This phenomenon is called mirror neurons, these visuospatial neurons that deal with human social interaction. And look at this. In a way, our brains don't know the difference between a well told story and something we see with our own two eyes. This is where I go back and tell you that best selling authors, why they are best selling, because they have the power. And best selling, I mean, I think a lot of politicians, my favorite is Martin Luther King. I mean, when he speaks or when I read a lot of books, I mean, these storytellers actually force me to close my eyes and imagine that I'm on the spot. So if someone can make you imagine, I think, a story is being really told well. There are various mediums of storytelling, but in the current times of pandemic, social media, we read and see many stories on daily basis. Instagram stories, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatnot. And something. I mean, a lot of stories come out that hey, I was diagnosed with corona and the agony and the pain and how the recovery and the wellness. So there are a lot of stories which leaves also a lasting impact on us. And sometimes we change our lifestyle based on someone other's story. I'm sure each one of you will resonate when I say that. Any story that we read has an impact on us. Sometimes we love the content, the word, or sometimes simply the way the story was told. Inspirations. This is where I come from. When I said that, when there is no course on storytelling, everyone has taken some kind of inspiration from someone somewhere. Imagine we are making a house, or we want to make a house, we want to buy a car. I mean, we pick up the magazines from the book stands, I mean, which are about interior designing and all. And we look at how the celebrities have made their villas and bungalows, and how the Rashtrapati Bhavan looks like from inside, and how all those Bollywood, celebrities' houses looks from inside. So we take some inspiration from there that, when I will build my own house, I think वो प्रियंका चोपड़ा वाला जो था ना वो बेडरूम का वो साइड में ड्रेसिंग सो आई थिंक that was beautiful. So people click pictures, take cuttings, and when it's about time to kind of design your own house, you take inspirations. That is the similar way where I took my own inspirations. And this was, I mean, there is a little interesting story behind all this. My mother was diagnosed with cancer, and every 21 days I had to take her for a chemotherapy, which used to end for like 6 to 8 hours. And a friend of mine from UK, I mean, he sent a Kindle to me, and that's when I started reading all these things. So this is a story, a classic story of Osama bin Laden. I'm sure there are hundreds of thousands of files and papers which would have been kept in FBI and CIA in US. But this book sums this particular story so well that I could actually imagine that I was, on the spot when this was happening. So this is one of my favorite, classic case of a story told well. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Imagine hedge funds. Anyone? I mean, if someone asked me, "Hey Ravi, I want to take you for a lecture on, some professor teaching about economies," I would not go there. I'm not interested in that subject. But this particular book really made me understand how economies work and how America works and how hedge fund works, because that's not my domain, but this form of storytelling actually taught me what I was not supposed to be taught. This is again one of my favorites. I mean, David Thorne and his really funny emails. Everyone have those moments when they don't feel well, or they're down, or a lot of negative vibes around. I pick up this particular book and I read any one email, and trust me, I mean, my day is made. This is about coding. I mean, by Dr. Swathi Pope. I mean, this is a little book by about Yash and Yashika learn about coding. This particular book is about 0 to 6 years of age group, that is early childhood education. Imagine that storytelling can easily make these little toddlers go crazy for coding. This is storytelling. There is a guy called Bodhisattva Das Gupta. He's the master of long copy ads. We collaborated on one subject, and you can look at this particular long copy ad. So, idea is in advertisements for the first 5 or 6 second span, whatever you read, you grasp and you consume it. But there are people like Bodhi who master the art of long form copy. And this particular ad, I mean, the traction online was 1.2 million views. This is a brilliant art of storytelling. My favorite, my biggest inspiration when it comes to creative storytelling, Pratesh Nair. He's the co-founder and the managing director of Prahlad Kakkar School of Business and Entrepreneurship. YouTube him, and I'm sure, I mean, you will watch all of his, talks, I mean, in various conferences and his own institution. Dr. Anirudh Malpani. When you go on LinkedIn for your professional content, there is an art of storytelling here, and he is by far one of the best, storyteller on LinkedIn about startups, MSME, innovation, tinkering labs, and how ATL. I mean, I'm sure he has written a lot of times about AIM and ATL and how, I mean, this is a very disruptive idea which has taken India to the next level. So this is the kind of copy, I mean, which is required on different platform, different kind of copies. Short Twitter stories. Could you ever imagine that, in under 140 characters, you'll be able to, tell a story? I'll read this a little slow. This is a little 140 character story on Twitter. Author is unknown. Everyone mocked him for walking 10 kilometers to school every day. Now people pay him to chair conferences 10,000 kilometers away. Under 140 characters, such a brilliantly told story. Second story, one of my favorites. 20,000 leagues under the sea lived a creature full of mystery. It came up once for fresh air, was shipped to a zoo, and now lives in despair. This is power of storytelling. So I'll come to the crux. My five or my six very crispy things for you all to remember. Read well. To write well, you have to read well. Observe what is happening around, on internet, off internet, around you. Observe your dog, observe your pet, observe your parents, observe your neighborhood, observe what people are listening to, what kind of music these laborers you listen to when they are working on, or what is the idea and the science behind it. Observation is a very, very important thing to understand. Look for an inspiration, like I look. I mean, you have seen, I mean, whom I've taken my inspiration. You will have to look for inspirations. I mean, if you like to read Chetan Bhagat, or you like to, Jeffrey Archer, I mean, you will have to look for inspiration that will give you the style of writing. Tell a story to yourself. Write a story and tell a story to yourself. If you think you like the story, I'm pretty sure that there will be takers, and a lot of other people will also like the story. And keep it very simple, be real. Human stories. I mean, this is something which is, I think, I mean, I can actually sum this up with the logical Indians, the better India, the nexus of good, humans of Bombay and humans of different cities. So I think this again, something that we all need to take care of. And here comes, my presentation comes to the end, and I'm still trying to find how do I switch it off. So this was a little thing that I wanted to share with all my friends today, Mr. Ramnan.
And thank you so much for sharing this presentation. And I would like, if possible, to share it with all the people who are on this call. I think you have beautifully brought out not only what goes into making a great story, but how stories can affect people in all walks of life. It can bring joy to a person who is in despair. It can bring inspiration to a person who is looking for it. It can bring a relief to a person who is looking for, who is in pain, or it could just be something that you want to give expression to, and it touches somebody's heart. And the important thing that you have also pointed out is any great story, if when you tell it to yourself, you should be excited to listen to that story yourself, and the ability to empathize with the reader and be able to visualize that particular story. Great movies, when you see a movie, actually the movie is not so great if the story is not so good. And if the story is good, you get transported into a completely different land. You are no longer with yourself. You are part of the characters that you are seeing in the movie, and you are walking their journey. And when you walk their journey, there comes the delight of actually experiencing what the storyteller is trying to convey to you. And I think that's what you have very beautifully brought out. And we have so many stories in India. India is a land, it's a 5,000-year-old civilization. I always marvel at every place in India, every temple that you see, every architecture that you see, every mythology character that you come across. They have rich stories behind them. Not only that, the animals have stories. I mean, India is a land where every animal figures in some story, whether it is in the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or the Panchatattva tales and all of that. And then we have inspirational stories, like the story of you were mentioning about one of the gentlemen who's a cop who's doing all that stuff. Ramanujam was a clerk in a English working for an English employer, and he used to, all his mathematical genius was in between the time, because he found this clerk work so boring that he used to complete that in about 5 or 10 minutes of his work, and then he used to spend the time deriving equations, which was then seen by Thomas Hardy, and people are still trying to solve those equations. So the whole idea of such a story inspiring millions of people who have that potential but who are not able to find expression. When they study the story of Ramanujam, or they study the story of Sir C.V. Raman, or that of Abdul Kalam, they can get inspired. I mean, Abdul Kalam was having fishing boats. He had only access to fishing boats, and he dreamt about flying a plane, and he wanted to become a pilot. And then, of course, he didn't become a pilot, but that dream and that story is so inspiring, because he became one of the finest scientists that India has ever seen, the missile scientist. And then he rose on to become the president of the country from a small town of Rameshwaram. And therefore, some of the best stories you get is from places that you least expect. You may think that, hey, I can get a huge basket of stories from a city, but if you go to rural India, you'll find even more better stories that you have to tell. Now, I want you to advise the young students, the young students who are all there listening to this particular conversation. They are involved in two things. One, they are involved in creating an innovation project. And second, they are involved in an innovation journey. How would you, if I were to go and ask a student, tell me the story of your innovation, or I come and tell me the story of your innovation journey, I would like them to express that, and maybe like to feature it in Atal Innovation Mission website or on a publication which we can jointly come up with and do. What would be the tips you will give to such a budding storyteller, but who is an innovator in the making?
Well, as I always believing in keeping it simple and kind of bringing the human kind of a quotient into it. So my tips to all the students would be that have a craving for real human stories. The kind of innovation that you are into through Atal Tinkering Labs and whatever you are making using the STEM and the robotics, wherever you are. I've heard so many beautiful stories from Atal Tinkering Labs coming out from Nellore, which is down south and 150 kilometers away from Tirupati, and beautiful stories coming out of there. So I think, I mean, what we really need to understand is how this particular story will help the entire humanity. Have that craving for real human stories. Link your innovation, link your learning with something which could kind of be of a greater good. So this is my first tip. Second advice would be read at least 1,000 words every day. When you read 1,000 words every day, it could be any medium. It could be a newspaper, it could be a magazine, or it could be anything. Even if you're eating a vada pav or a samosa and you're served on a piece of paper, I mean, read that particular thing. By doing that, I mean, I think, I mean, in some time you will know the art of the storytelling, how the story is told by the media or by the magazine or by maybe a bestseller. And when you actually sit to write your own story, I'm pretty sure that, something that you have read in the past, I mean, would be there fresh in your brain, and you would want to try that particular thing. You'll try 10 times and then you'll try to change your style. But I think reading at least 1,000 words every day is really important. And since we are sitting in the pandemic times, I would strongly suggest that watch documentaries on Vice News. There is a channel on YouTube which is called Vice, Vice. I'm a great fan of Vice News, and I think that's my inspiration for doing whatever I would want to do in the future. I mean, when I retire, I would want to travel. I would really cover those stories, and I think, I mean, with Adult Tinkering Labs, I'm going to do that after the pandemic when I travel for at least 40 to 50 Adult Tinkering Labs in the rural areas and see what are the kind of stories. So I think watching Vice News on YouTube will give you a great know-how of other stories from across the world, which is, I mean, I could say that it's a small step of becoming a global citizen without even traveling during the pandemic. So when you watch what's happening in Syria and what's happening with the little children in different areas in Africa, and what is the kind of innovation in robotics which a set of few girls in Kenya brought, and I think, I mean, you will have your stories and you'll have your inspiration. So these are a few little tips that I'd like to give Mr. Ramnan.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think all the tips are, I mean, the first step of having that human element. What is the larger good that you have been trying through your innovation? The moment that story is told, it touches you. Even if your innovation is not perfectly there, but the larger good and the intent and the human impact and the human element is going to make a very important difference. The second point, brought to my memory again my dad, and you're evoking old memories. But one habit he inculcated in me, which I am so grateful to. When I was in school, he said, "This Times of India, you should read the center page. You have the editor's column, and there are three columns, three sections in that. One is a humor element part, one is a generic stuff, and one is a political comment." He said, "You read that loud every day." He wanted me to read it loud. And he said, "If you don't understand any particular word or a line, mark it and ask me what it means." And I did that systematically for a couple of years. And I think, when I now look back and say, what did the ability for me to be able to relate to many things and the ability for me to say concisely what I want to say, I think that all of those learnings came through just that reading. And when you read a story. In fact, each of them is a story by itself, but one is a political story, one is a humor laced story, and one is a generic story. And I think every one of us who does that sort of reading will inculcate a great ability to tell a story. And I want to know, what is the role a school teacher, a parent, or a family can play to nurture the writing skill of a young student? Is it important for them to do that? And if so, how can they play a role?
Of course, with the kind of virtual world that we are living in, Mr. Ramnan, all as parents and teachers should realize that, when previously it was digital first, but I think it's digital only as the future for the next when a couple of years or maybe a few years. A lot of people will kind of ignore traveling. So I think we need to realize that physical meetings and face-to-face storytelling would happen a little less, and writing and then the medium of writing where the other person is consuming your content will happen more. So looking at that, I think we all should ask our students to create archives in their own words, encouraging them to write blogs and not judge them with the mistakes, and only focusing on the intentions and the crux of their writing, which is not just a piece of content, but it is feelings in the form of ink or words. We need to realize, a lot of teachers and a lot of parents, I mean, they say, "Hey, why is it THERE? It should be THEIR." Come on, let's focus on what was the intent of that little child to kind of write, and let's not focus on the spelling errors and the typos and the formatting and all. Let's first understand where this little kid is coming from. What does he really want to say? And I think, when you really, just like your father made you read Times of India every day, I think, there have been a good impact on you because of that little habit that he inculcated in you. But imagine if we make our kids write every day. If not, more, they maybe 150 words in terms of whatever you saw today. I can actually ask my son that, how was the day? He'll actually tell me that, Dad, I did that, and I went on my online classes and stuff like that. Can I ask him to write about that particular thing and, archive it somewhere? This is going to make, them kind of, observe that, where they're going wrong and what is the kind of feelings, that they have in their heart, which they really want to ink. So this is something that I would want to request all the school teachers and parents and family to play that role, wherein make students to create archives in their own words and let them write what they really feel like. If you are just, you came back from a holiday. We always, I still remember writing the essays. पहले हमारे ज़माने में होता था गाय पे निबंध लिखो. Now, the essays and all, they have found some variety. So I think that also played a lot of good part in terms of our upbringing and my reading and all. So that is one advice that I would want to give, that write 150 words every day, and that will impact your storytelling and reading and writing skills.
That's great advice, and I think in this day and world, writing should be cultivated as an art. We have got into the just telling on videos. Videos is also a good mechanism and of conveying a story, but writing as an art enables you to crystallize your thinking and sharpen your thinking and bring a focus to what you have to really write and what you don't. When you speak, you can speak a lot of extraneous things which are not relevant to the topic. But when you start writing, then you realize that, oh, this is not relevant to what I'm trying to say. And you start focusing, your story gets sharper, it becomes more impactful, and you're able to convey the content in a very, very precise, clear manner, which is having an impact. And I think the advice that you gave, that write every day, at least 50 words or 100 words, that's a fantastic thing. You can maintain your own log, your diary. You can write a blog every day. Don't bother about the spelling and the grammar, but look at content. And that's the advice you're giving to the teacher and the parent. Don't start criticizing on the spelling and the grammatical mistakes. Rather, see the intent of the content. And when you see the intent of the content and you're saying, hey, this is striking a new picture for me, and this is something that I had not thought of, then there is a great storyteller, and you have to encourage that person to write or narrate their own stories. So I think there will be a lot of questions. Ronak, I'm sure the students are eager to ask some questions to Ravi ji. So if there are any questions, can you put forward the students' questions?
Definitely, sir. So in the interest of time, I'll be asking 3 questions, and I'm glad to share that not only students have asked questions, but I can see a principal of a school has also asked a question. So I'll first take an opportunity to share this question. This is from Dr. Sudarshan Sharma, who's the principal of a Zilla school from Aspirational District Gaya in Bihar. Okay, so the kind of reach that we are getting is quite amazing. Okay, Mr. Sudarshan Sharma has rightly, Dr. Sudarshan Sharma has rightly asked this question to Mr. Santlani: is how does the rural community stories help the problem-solving mindset of the students of the same community?
Can
I
you
will just repeat it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll just repeat the question. So how does the story, how does the real story of rural communities, or writing stories about rural communities, help those rural students to solve problems or to have a problem-solving mindset? The connection between rural storytelling and problem-solving mindset.
I think Ronak, and thank you, Doctor, for asking this question, because there was supposed to be a huge divide where, pre-internet era, where we were only dependent on newspapers and the stories that we used to read there. But now, if I read some kind of a story, it's a very quick thing for me to kind of reach out to the person on whom the story was written, or the person who wrote it. So I think the kind of link that we have between the rural and the urban population, I think, that's where the entire impact lies. When the rural stories are reported on any of the mediums and the platforms, I'm pretty sure that any problem that I have right now in my professional career, or some problem problem around me or in my neighborhood, I'm pretty sure that there is a solution which already exists. So if there is some kind of reporting done for a problem being faced in rural areas, someone somewhere sitting reading that particular story would have the solution for that particular thing. I mean, look at these teacher warriors. I mean, in Arunachal Pradesh, I mean, there is an organization called Jamse Gatsal. And if you Google, that particular school, I mean, this is a school for 108 students, and it was reported by some newspaper somewhere a couple of years back, and we found it from there, and we reached out to them, and we reported their particular story, and now we are working with a lot of corporates in terms of how to make that particular school a tech-enabled school where technology is not there. So I think when you ask this, how these human connection stories from rural areas will benefit the entire mankind, I think, I mean, we are just bridging or just playing a part of a bridge where, solutions are there on the internet. People sitting with solutions. I'm pretty sure if a school really wants to do robotics and they're not finding any, resources, and that story is reported to Mr. Ramanan, I'm pretty sure they will have a solution for that particular school, because the network of Mr. Ramanan and Adult Tinkering Labs is, I think, by far one of the most deepest in the penetrated network in the K-12 education ecosystem of India in the history. I think, I mean, we are playing a role of being the bridge in terms of, I mean, finding solutions to the problems, and people could walk on us as a bridge and find that.
Yeah, Ronak, any more? Any question?
Yes, sir. So the second question is actually for both of you. This is a question from Miss Anna Kumar, who is an ATL in charge of one of the schools, and she's asking to both of you that animated storytelling is one of the most engaging types of storytelling. So, as young Ramana Namanathan and as young Ravi Santlani, what were your favorite animation pieces or story pieces as young children?
I'll let Mr. Ramanan answer first.
Yeah. See, when I was growing up, we unfortunately did not have too much of animation, but we had a lot of comics, and I was a great comic reader. I've read all the comics on Phantom, on Tarzan, on on in Times of India. My first page that I will turn to is the last page where you used to have cartoon stories from Henry and all of those characters, Lassie and so on. And even today I remember how gripping it was. They used to have only three captions or three pictures, and a story used to be conveyed. The continuation of the story is the next day, and I used to be eagerly waiting for the next day. But in three pictures, or four pictures, they used to convey a story. Now that's taken. Animation is going to the next level of comic based storytelling, because it is comics in action, right? And I think these stories have a lasting impression. I know the lasting impression it had on me. Phantom. Those of you who have read the Phantom comics, he had a falcon which used to carry the mail from the jungle to his cave. He has a skull cave, and any mail that comes, he used to carry it and bring it to him. Now, when I designed the first product on local area network, I had the opportunity to create a local area network. The first product that I designed on it was electronic mail, and I named that network as Falcon, because I remembered that the Falcon of the Phantom comic used to carry the mail from the jungle to the destination. And by the way, the word Falcon expanded to Fast Access Local Computer Network. So I created a acronym for Falcon, but at the same time, that story came to my mind, and that inspired me as the first application to be developed on electronic mail. Now, at the linkage, it is like Steve Jobs saying, you connect the dots at the back end, right? And this is a dot I connected. But in some manner, these stories had such a powerful impact that as you go further, it does express itself in some manner or the other in whatever you do, and the way you want to convey it, right? And everybody loved this word Falcon. I mean, it became a product of TCS, and TCS sold that product to many places. And they all asked me, how did you think about this word Falcon? But that's a story that I remember very distinctly coming out of the animation or the comic-based stories that I used to read?
We have something in common, Mr. Ramanan. I mean, my entire childhood was spent in reading comics. Of course, I mean we didn't had internet back then. I mean, I'm talking about early '80s, and I used to cycle a kilometer from my house and kind of rent the comics. And there were other few friends who would rent other comics which they wouldn't read. I mean, just so that we could, as Ronak said, I'm a Sindhi, so you could exchange that particular set of comics. So it was all about the era of Super Commando Dhruv and Chacha Chaudhary and Sabu. Chacha Chaudhary, again, that was a storytelling that there is a solution for every problem which exists in the world. So Chacha Chaudhary was that solution for every little child, of those times. I mean, Akbar Birbal, of course. I mean, those stories and Vikram and Betal, I mean, which used to come. So I think, they were also a great time pass, but also there were some great learnings from these little comic books. I mean, at that back then, and how Vikram and Betal and how impatience. I mean, I actually understood the word of the real meaning of impatience when I used to watch Vikram and Betal. So those things. I mean, thank you very much, whoever asked this question, to kind of you forced me to go back in my memory lane, and I can still remember that when Diamond Comics and Pran and a lot of amazing stuff, and Tintin and Champak, and I think Balhans, all of these things. So ऐसे बचपन और हमारा गुजरा है, and this is how it is. Over to you.
But just to round it up, I think animation-based stories are a great way of telling your story, and especially when you give a presentation, instead of just a presentation, an animation-driven presentation always makes a little better impact. So I would encourage all the young students, because you have the tools, you have tools like Adobe, Creative Spark, and all of that stuff. You can use all that to create a very good story and an impactful story about your innovation. So Ronak, I think we have had we probably crossed the time, and I'm sure people are eager to go for dinner and listen to the story from their family. So I don't want
to. We have one last question for you categorically.
Okay.
So this last question is from a student from an Atal Tinkering Lab, and the student is asking, sir, how can I share my stories with Atal Innovation Mission?
Yeah, you should definitely share your story. We have an ATL Wall of Fame, and that ATL Wall of Fame, we showcase some of the best stories of innovation, your tinkering journeys, and so on. So we'll be delighted to, and it's a quarterly sort of story newsletter where we are capturing inspiring stories of schools, teachers, mentors, as well as the students. So it is not just limited to the student, it is also extended to everybody. And the ATL Wall of Fame is an opportunity for you to share and showcase your story, which can be told to others, which can be enjoyed by them, and can inspire many people.
Thank you so much, sir. I think for the sake of time, we will definitely conclude this call. We have bombarded with a lot of interesting questions. Everyone wants to know your CEO story, Mr. Santlani CEO story, but in the interest of time, we would like to conclude today's session. With that, okay. Mr. Ravi Santlani, any parting thoughts from your end?
Well, always a pleasure speaking virtually to a different stakeholders, parents, teachers, and students. I mean, I would repeat what our Honorable Prime Minister has been saying since quite some time now. Let's be human. Let's be understanding citizens of India. I mean, let's use social distancing. Let's stay indoors if you don't have any important work to do. Let's ignore traveling, and let's just be with our family. I mean, let's take this pandemic as an opportunity to kind of be very close to our family and spend some quality time. Everyone coming from Delhi, Mumbai, rural areas, everywhere, it's a rush. But, I think, that's my parting note that, I would request all of you who are watching this on the various different mediums, stay home, stay safe until you don't have any emergency. And let's trust the government and, of course, keep innovating and keep tinkering.
Thank you, Ravi ji. It was a delight and a pleasure and a privilege to listen to you and your comments, your insights into what goes into great storytelling, the need for storytelling, and the ability for everyone to be able to tell their story. So this is not confined to a writer or just a professional storyteller. Every one of us has the ability to tell a story because we have lived it. We are living it. And you have a story to tell. You have a story to tell about what you do. You have a story to tell about what you have achieved, what you have learned, and what has inspired you on the journey. And therefore, I would encourage everyone to exercise this innate creative ability that you have to be able to tell your story and very effectively so that we can, all of us can benefit from your story. And as they say, there is a saying which goes saying that those who tell the great stories rule the world. And I'm sure that your story will in some way rule the world. Thank you so much for joining. And as Raviji said, be safe, take the time to connect with yourself and your family, and in the process will evolve a great story that you can narrate to the rest of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure speaking to you and wish you all a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.